Hello, everyone, and welcome. We are just getting ready and setting up and giving everyone a moment to jump into the session. Welcome, everyone. We are getting set up and welcoming everyone to our session. Our numbers are steadily climbing. So get settled, and we'll be starting in just a moment. And we have some nice music for you while we wait and let our fellow participants join in.
Amazing.
Yes, we're getting very high tech these days. All right. So I'm going to kickstart us off with a bit of housekeeping items. So welcome, everyone. We're very excited to be here today with you on LinkedIn Live. Our topic for today is laying the HR and legal foundation for association success. And so welcome to our network. Welcome to our association members and executives. We're excited to be here today to talk to you. And so few housekeeping items just to go through. Make sure that you have closed any browser pages on your web browser that you don't need to ensure you have high quality of the webinar. Please also make sure that if you are having any troubles, you exit and re-enter the event page to watch our stream live. Today, we have a robust program ready for you. You will see in the event, it says 45 minutes. We're anticipating we might go up to the hour and do a full hour, given all of the different nuances that are impacting associations today. And so if you can hang on the line with us, that's great, but don't fret if you can't and you've only set aside 45 minutes, that's okay. We're recording, so you can go back and watch any parts that you might be interested in afterwards or that you might miss. So without further ado, the last thing I'll say is if you have any chat questions, please send them through to us at any time. We will have a dedicated hot seat Q&A, and I will be supporting the moderation of that, and I'll be tracking your questions. So today with us, we have Jordan Rodney, VP of HR and Legal Services at Max People, founder and employment law expert of Rodney Employment Law. And then we're joined by Hen Sasson, our director of the Center of Excellence, and a huge component of our business. And so very excited to have these two experts on the line. And I'll pass it over to Hen to kick us off.
Thank you so much, Joe. And thank you everyone for joining us today. It's a pleasure being here. And I'm very excited, Jordan, to facilitate this webinar with you. We're a great duo, so I'm sure it will be a great webinar today. For those that don't know, CSAE is one of our valued partners. So we're really happy to give back to its members today. So as Joe mentioned, I'm one of the HR directors at Max People. For those that do not know Max People, we're an HR consulting firm. We've been around for officially now 20 years, and we're headquartered in Richmond Hill, Ontario. And Jordan, who heads our employment law practice, Rodney Employment Law, but he's also our subject matter expert on the Max People HR side. So Jordan, do you want to say a few words before we kick it off?
Well, I just want to welcome everyone today, and it's always great to be presenting with you. Reminds me back to our COVID times where we were doing this twice a week for 6 months in 2020. But we've been very fortunate over the years to have created a real niche with nonprofits and associations. And as you said, we've been around 20 years. Aside from doing HR and employment law through our sister company, Rodney Employment Law, we also do training and recruitment. In fact, we're at an association today, Toronto Construction Association, doing our CEO is doing leadership training there today. What I want to say about associations, Hen, and I'm sure you would agree, is all other things equal, they tend to be on the smaller side in terms of numbers, but despite being small, they're pretty mighty and they carry a lot of clout. And the individuals, at least that I've interacted with over the years from associations, have a certain passion that is maybe different from other organizations. And also associations deal with a lot of complex issues, some of which we're going to talk about today. So I'm really happy to be here, and I'm really happy to be here with you.
Amazing. And I absolutely agree with you. They may be small, but there's a lot of great work that has been done or is being done with associations. So lots of respect there. Now, Jordan, as we kick things off, I wanted to talk to you about the last 5 years. As really, I would say the last 5 years, officially March, starting from March 2020 up to now, which is really 5 years, a lot has changed in the world, economy, starting from COVID. And Jordan, I just watched a really funny video the other day of someone washing, from a video from 2020 of someone washing a milk carton with soap and water. That was the uncertainty that we were dealing with, in 2020 from an economic perspective. Of course, we didn't know what was going on, but also from a health and safety, we were scared of one another. So, we went from COVID all the way to some world political issues, which were not so great, all the way to most recently, the US and the tariffs that are coming and that have come are coming. And no one really knows the full extent of what that will mean for our economy, for the world. So lots of uncertainty. And we know that associations are feeling it as well. So really our hope today, and Jordan, I'm sure you will agree, is really we're hoping to give you some tips and tricks, maybe some tools that will hopefully make your life slightly easier. Jordan, do you agree?
Yeah, I think that was really well said. The only thing I would say is we often ask ourselves when we're doing these webinars, what would success look like for the participants, for the people who took time out of their day? And for me, and I think for Hen as well, if we can give you some peace of mind, and if you learned a handful of tips today that you kind of didn't know before, or things that maybe reinforce what you're already doing, then I think it's been successful. So that's our goal today. And let's move on, Hen, to the
So I'm just going to leave this here for 1 second. We'll share this in the end as well, but we do want you to scan our QR code. You will get through this QR code a checklist, and you will also receive a complimentary 30-minute conversation with one of our HR gurus. It could be me, it could be Jordan, it could be any of our other experts. So please download this. We'll put it again in the end. I'm going to leave it for 1 more second, and we're going to move on to the agenda. Okay, moving on.
So what we're going to talk about in the time that we have today, we're going to talk a little bit about recruitment and how it's changed in the current landscape over the last few years, and what associations can be doing to overcome these challenges. I'm then going to talk about employment agreements. This is like always on my mind, always on the lawyers' minds in our firm, and always on our clients' minds. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. Hen and I are going to share the moving on to performance management, and when things don't work with performance management, discipline. And then finally, we're going to wrap up with managing layoffs and terminations. And I always say, Hen, our clients are not in the business of terminating, but sometimes, you have to hire slow, fire fast. So we want to give you some good solutions how to do that. And of course, as Joanna said, and thank you, Joanna, for all your background work, because we couldn't have done this without you. If there's any questions, please type in the chat and we will answer your questions either in real time or at the end.
Perfect. Yes, we want to keep this interactive, so please submit your questions and we'll answer them as potentially they come or in the end, depending on how this session goes. So let's talk about opportunities in the current recruitment landscape, specifically as it relates to associations. And Jordan, as you know, I work with quite a few associations, and I would say the common theme or common challenge that they're facing right now is keeping and retaining good talent. You mentioned earlier that associations tend to be smaller in nature. Maybe they're not a lot of people, but there's a lot of work to be done. So the need to have really good people is great. It's really important. So, a lot of my conversations with associations are revolving around performance management, discipline, though we don't like to get there, and potentially terminations. Now, when looking at the recruitment landscape right now, we actually believe that there is a lot of opportunities. Jordan, associations a lot of them have gone virtual since the pandemic and remain virtual. Some maybe are hybrid, but because there's the hybrid or virtual environments right now, there is a greater outreach, specifically a geographical outreach that you can have to really find good candidates. But Jordan, you and I already spoke about this earlier, and we said that we see a lot of good talent as it is right now as well. So it seems like there is good talent out there, specifically because of the economy right now. A lot of people have lost their jobs or are losing their jobs. So good people may be out there even within your geographical location. But regardless, if you are in a virtual environment, maybe you can find the best candidate in British Columbia. So just food for thought. Jordan, do you have any thoughts about the current opportunities?
Yeah, no, I think first of all, you're on your A game today because you're asking me if I have other things to add, and you've kind of said it all. But what I will say is, which I would say to any organization, but particularly associations, is don't settle in the recruitment process. Recruitment is hard. Recruitment, some associations, executives in associations, those that support associations would say it's painful, it's challenging. I've been recruiting for 25 years, and it's hard. But it's kind of like being a conductor in an orchestra. When you find that great candidate, then it's like, it's beautiful. It's seamless. I can't even put into words on a webinar what it's like when you have that right candidate. And there's actually someone on our legal team that I often remind her of the story. I tell her that, my partner Miriam and I, we were trying to hire someone for months and months, not for months, for weeks and weeks and weeks. And we just couldn't find who we were looking for. And then we found one of our lawyers today, Hamira. And I remember being at a cottage. I remember exactly where I was standing. And I called Miriam and we both kind of said, like, she's the one, like Hamira is the one. And when it's kind of like when you meet your spouse and like, this is like, I'm not comparing it to a marriage, Hen, but you know what I mean? So take the time to find the right person.
But once you find them, act fast. That's the last thing else.
Yes, absolutely.
So let's talk about the current landscape in general. As we spoke about, economy right now is unfortunately in an uncertain time. We don't know what the tariffs will actually do or how it will impact, but there is a lot of fear. Now, associations, whether they're impacted directly by the tariffs or not, there are fears that associations currently have. What we are seeing right now is concerns about financial stability. We're seeing concerns about membership engagement and retention. We're seeing concerns about workforce burnout, specifically, as we talked about again, the small, lean teams. There's a lot of work to be done, and people tend to get overworked, or people do work a lot. Jordan, there has been a digital transformation in the last 5 years. I mean, you've learned so much about technology, and I want to give you a shout out for that, because there is a lot to learn about technology. And the reality is, where we were 5-6 years ago, where associations may have hosted a lot of conferences, in-person events, the desire nowadays to meet in person is really not as high, and maybe no longer. So associations had to, and are having to, adapt to this virtual workspace and virtual life. And really, I would say that there's changes constantly that are happening, which are posing a lot of concerns for associations. What are your thoughts, Jordan, about that?
Yeah, I mean, well, it's interesting because I'm over 50 and, I think for my age, I'm actually quite good with technology. Not great, but quite.
No, you're good. You're good.
Better than average. And I don't think that technology is going away, unfortunately. So there's lots of things that you can do in the workplace with technology. And I think it's all about the attributes that associations have to have of their staff: agility, nimbleness, flexibility, being able to take on multiple tasks, because they're small and mighty, they're also lean. Associations don't have like huge headcounts, and you're often fighting for resources. So digital technology can be of immense value to associations, and something to keep in mind.
Absolutely. And AI is becoming a very big part of workplaces. So keeping ahead of the curve versus being the lag in the curve is important. So, if you haven't considered AI already and the impact or what you can do, please do maybe speak to a consultant about it, because there are a lot of benefits if you give it a chance. So just throwing that out there. Moving on, Jordan, to the candidate experience. Let's say associations, it is an uncertain time right now. Maybe associations aren't necessarily looking for people right now, even having a lean team, because again, there's a lot of uncertainty. But if you are hiring, you want to make sure that the candidate experience is a good one. Why? Well, social media nowadays, and just in general, the World Wide Web out there is big, and there's a lot of information that could be accessed by a lot of people. Meaning, if someone doesn't have a good positive experience, it could be a bad Google review, it could be a Glassdoor, it could be on social media. You don't want that, and you really do want to create that good experience, because that speaks about your organization, and people do share positive experiences. So how do you create a good positive experience for candidates? Well, you communicate, you share timelines. If a candidate is emailing you, you respond to them respectfully. Even if you don't have the answers, you still respond back. So constant communication. You want to also make sure that you're streamlining your process for recruitment. So make sure that you're using the same process for everyone, same kind of questions for everyone, maybe same people that are interviewers throughout the process, so that you have the same people, able to rank, review these individuals versus different people from different departments, or just in general having a mishmash of people. You want to make it personal and engaging. When you're meeting with people, you want to give them the time of day. You schedule 30 minutes, meet with them, get to know them, make them feel comfortable. There's a lot of nerves that happen when people interview. You want to make them feel comfortable, get to know them. And then lastly, close the loop. Even if you don't hire the individual, circle back with them, let them know that they're not selected. That's the right thing to do. And obviously to thank them for their time, because they did spend time getting to know you and, trying to see whether there is a potential connection there. Now, Jordan, I do have a question for you with this particular slide. If candidates come back to you and ask you, for feedback about why they weren't selected, what would you say you can share, and what would you say you can't share?
I think what you don't want to say is, I'll keep your resume on file. You certainly don't want to say that. Yeah. But look, I'm of the view that I think you could give feedback to a candidate at a high level, because look, I'm hearing Estrella Frias, our head of talent, our head of recruitment, telling me the most important thing is keeping the candidates happy. Even those candidates, you're still a candidate even if you don't move forward and accept the job. So, to give you an example, Hen, a woman who used to work with us for 7 years, and then I think, by the way, we got to move on from a timing perspective. A woman who worked with us for 7 years and is now a VP in a company and is going off on maternity leave, posted a job on LinkedIn. This is not an association, but it's a fairly small organization. I've already had 2 people reach out to me from my network to basically say, hey, can you let this person know that I'm applying for the job? So that's because you kept in touch with these people. And that's the hidden job network, right? That's how you get jobs. You don't get jobs necessarily from applying. You get jobs from the hidden job network. And it just happened to me this morning. 2 separate people reached out to a LinkedIn post from last night. In fact, it's the one I spoke to you about.
That is very interesting.
Yeah. So that's what I'd say on that.
Thank you for sharing that. So moving on, knowing, timing, moving beyond the dollars and cents, what we want to talk about here is, we know associations don't necessarily have big budgets for salary increases, but there's still ways of attracting and retaining talent. It's not all about salaries, even though you may believe that. The number one thing I would say about this is, beyond the salaries, is having a connection, having amazing leaders in your organization that show respect for others, that lead by example, that share a shared vision and share a passion, goes a long way. When people feel connected to their leaders, the organization, it's more than the dollars for them. Another thing, which may be dollars, but professional growth, investing in your people, whether it's internal, having a training program. We have that internally at Max People. We have it, one of our leaders in the organization leads a training program internally. Doesn't have to necessarily cost you a lot of money, but you have sessions that your staff participate, or you invest in external courses, certifications, but really showing interest in investing in your people does go a long way. Well-being is an interesting one, Jordan. I find that the generations coming in, specifically, I don't want to generalize, but Gen Z coming in do care a lot more about the well-being. And what does that mean? Well-being could be a wellness fund to use for Pilates classes, yoga classes, gym memberships, having a health spending account over a designated amount for chiropractor, massage therapist, etc., because they want to choose what they want to spend their money on. And one thought that I have from an association that I work with is that they run a monthly yoga class, a monthly yoga virtual class where everyone participates. And that would be considered a wellness initiative. So just food for thought there. And lastly, which I believe is very important, is work-life balance. If you're already in a virtual work environment, you're already basically doing some of that. Even if in a hybrid, you're allowing people to work from home and have that work-life balance. But beyond that, we see shorter summer days. So like summer hours, Friday shorter days, additional paid time off, flexible hours. Those are the types of things we see when it comes to work-life balance. And I know, Jordan, you wanted to add something here.
Yeah. I mean, this slide to me reflects very deeply with associations. And I think about one of my favorite sports movies of all time, and I'm saying this in honor of the late, great Gene Hackman, Hoosiers, which was a film in 1986 where he coaches an underdog basketball team to the championship. And there's a scene when he says, getting to the state finals is beyond your wildest dreams. And then he says, focus on the fundamentals, focus on what got you here. And if you're working for an association, and I'm not saying associations don't pay well and offer development opportunities, but I'm saying many people work in associations because they are connected to what the association does. Imagine we've had associations where people with developmental disabilities, people who support the deaf-blind, deaf and visually impaired communities. I mean, imagine going to bed every night knowing that you are contributing to something that is, a higher purpose. I don't mean to sound like cliche here, but that is in large part why people join associations. So it's focusing on the fundamentals, the intangibles.
100%.
Anyways, let's move on, Hen.
Yes.
And let's.
So I'm going to ask you the first question. Oh, you don't want to ask the questions? Okay.
I think we should talk. I think we should move to the next section. So
sounds good.
Well, we'll go back for a second, Hen, and maybe just talk about the first question about the legal implications for social media. So when you've advised clients in the past, when they say like, what can we do when we're hiring staff in terms of social media? I mean, what I tell them is you absolutely should be going right to social media before hiring, but then making sure that you don't make hiring decisions based on what you see on social media. And it's for other reasons, but as part of the whole picture, the recruitment process, the resume, the reference checks, social media should be part of that. And this is exactly why I tell my kids in their early 20s, don't be posting yourself online, drinking or doing something that a future employer would not look upon favorably. You have to be professional. So I'm curious what you tell people, and then we'll move on to the employment.
Yeah, I would say that kids or young adults nowadays are way more wary than what we were back in the day. We had all kinds of pictures back on Facebook. But what I will say is, whether you like it or not, your social media represents you and the company that you work for. So whatever political views you have, whatever feelings you have about whatever you feel, if it's available for others to see, there is a reflection on the company that you work for or the company that is looking to hire you. So there is an importance to look at social media now more than ever, I would say. But yes, please don't base your decisions solely on social media.
And the other thing, Chen, once you're hired, given, I'll just say, political issues around the world, whether it be conflicts, whether it be political parties, it's very important to know that a company has the right to have a policy that says, that puts boundaries on your social media posts and consequences for violating those policies. I know you're going to talk about policies in a minute, but I think that's important because we have gotten, one of our advisors, Stacey Archer, just helped me with very complicated political expression policy for a client that, there's about 10 different drafts going back and forth. So this is a real issue. What can your employees say in the workplace? So moving on, changing focus from recruitment a little bit, talking about employment agreements. Hen talked about the toolkit. This would be one of the most important tools in the toolkit, having good agreements, having good policies. And one of the things we see a lot in associations, Hen, you and I have had many debates about this. I know that there's lawyers on my team that have very strong opinions about associations because some of them do their resourcing through government funding. And so they tend to use fixed term agreements, and fixed term agreements are agreements that have a start and end date. But what often happens is that fixed term agreement morphs from 1 year into 6 years or 7 years. And really you have 7 1-year fixed term agreements, but that's really 7 years of continuous employment. So you have to be very careful. And we advise our clients often, especially association clients, of when you use a fixed term contract. Obviously, for a maternity leave, for a short-term medical leave, of course, you're going to use a fixed term. And sometimes for funding, it makes sense, but just get legal advice or get HR advice from someone like Max People before you do that. The other thing I want to keep in mind is, are you a contractor or are you an employee? Because a lot of times associations or other companies, they tend to bring people on as contractors, but for all intents and purposes, they're employees. And why do people want to be contractors? Well, there's lots of advantages to doing that, but there's also huge risks for both the organization and for you individually. So, it's like the dental office that calls up and says, we have our hygienists, they're all contractors, but they work 35 hours for our dental practice and they get paid even if patients cancel. Well, and they're using our tools and they get paid despite the number of patients they see. I mean, those are not contractors, those are employees. And the biggest thing that courts look at is the degree of control that the company has. To that point, I just want to talk about a case because an employee is a contract of service versus an independent contractor, which is a contract for service. And in between those two, Hen, which you and I, again, have talked about, there's something called a dependent contractor. And that means someone who is dependent, their livelihood depends on an association. Even though they might have little side gigs, the bulk of their work is done for an association. And in that case, that person might not be entitled to things like vacation pay and stat pay and overtime, but they are entitled, if they get terminated, to reasonable notice at common law. So this is a new legal concept that's coming up. It's in between the employee and contractor. And again, I know you and I have talked about this. In this Thurston versus Ontario Children's Lawyer case, you had a lawyer in this case that spent 39% of their billable hours working for the children's lawyer. So when they got fired, they said to the children's lawyer, okay, I'm an employee because I'm dependent on you for my livelihood. The court said, no, it has to be more than 50% of your billings. You have to be almost exclusive to that organization. So in that case, the person was unsuccessful, but I would say to associations, make sure you have either an HR or legal professional look at your contracts before deciding if you're actually a contractor. And the last thing I want to say before I move on to you, Hen, move back to you, is employment agreements, they matter. They matter significantly. What we do with our clients is we make sure that through legislative developments, through the case law, Ken, your team's just done a great job updating the agreements because of the changes coming in July, changes to hours of work, changes to location of work, changes to paydays, and your team has updated all of our contracts. But these things matter, and this could be a significant cost if it's not done properly. And I know we've talked about that over the years.
Absolutely. And I would say it's the most important document that you have with an employee. Employment agreements, hands down, are the most important document. And you want to make sure that they are kept up to date. So Jordan, moving on to policies, I spoke to you about this, Jordan. Over the years, we've gotten a lot of pushback about having policies in place at companies. The pushback I get is specifically around, we like flexibility, and we like that, it's maybe not as formal and everything's so fun and easy, but everything is so fun and easy until it's not. And the reality is across Canada, you must have certain policies. What are those must-haves? Definitely violence and harassment policies. Depending on the province that you're in, maybe accessibility policies, definitely health and safety policies. Even if you're fully virtual, there still needs to be health and safety policies. So just because you don't want policies doesn't mean that you don't have to have. So these are legally mandated policies. And again, depending on the province, you may have different requirements. But truthfully, Jordan, I believe that policies are a good thing for organizations, for associations. And why? I think they provide clarity. I think they provide guidance, consistency, and fairness, specifically if they're followed. I think guidelines are better than no guidelines. And of course, you can make exceptions to the rule, but having them in place does make everyone feel better. Jordan, from a legal perspective, do you have anything to add to why policies are important, or what is your legal perspective on this?
Yeah, I mean, what I'll say, using you and I as an example, if we worked in an association and you were a great performer and you asked for a personal leave of absence this summer to go to a family reunion, and there was a personal leave of absence policy that said, you had to work a certain amount of time, you had to have good performance reviews, and the organization says, Hen, you deserve it, you've worked hard, go enjoy your family reunion for 4 weeks. And then Jordan comes along. Jordan's an underperforming, marketing analyst at an association, or membership coordinator at an association. I have attendance issues. I have performance issues. I asked for a leave of absence to take an overseas course. And in the absence of having a policy on personal leave of absence, then Jordan feels that he's treated unfairly. Hen gets the leave approved. Jordan doesn't. You need to have policies. You need to have a standard by which to compare situations to. And without that standard, and what I'll say, Hen, and I know this is something that you agree with, the policies should reflect the association. So you don't want to have, they're only bureaucratic if they don't add value.
Yeah.
So you want to have policies that add value, that are meaningful, that are easy to read, easy to understand, and speak to the culture and tone of the association. And that's something I think our team is exceptionally good at, because we don't pull stuff off the shelf. But if we're working for an association of 16 people, we're gonna write policy that reflects that organization.
I agree. And the last point I want to make on this slide is it is very important to review your policies at least annually, and even sooner if there are legislative updates that come up. So please, keep yourself in the know when it comes to updates, as it is important to update your policies. Jordan, I'm moving on to performance management, discipline, and terminations. And, connecting policies to this is policies are the foundation to performance management, discipline, and terminations. There is an argument to be made that if you don't have policies in place, that people don't know what's expected of them, even when it comes to just common sense. Common sense is not so common sense nowadays. I just had a situation last week, Jordan, that a client reached out to me. An employee talked disrespectfully to other employees. And my first question to them was, what's your policy right now with regards to respect in the workplace, code of conduct, behavior in the workplace? I was looking for the policy because based on that, I know whether, the person knew how to behave, even though you would think that they should know. This is the argument that is made. So I don't know if you have anything to add, Jordan, about this. But
no, I mean, I think policies, I mean, these are foundational. These are the things that you have to have in an association, and it's easy to do. Do the things that are easy, and then it allows you to deal with the complex issues in a more seamless way, because you have that foundation. So
it's the guidelines. So moving on to feedback. So performance management involves feedback. We believe the best tool to give feedback is a 360. And it doesn't have to be a comprehensive tool that you spend a lot of money on, although you can. I just recently, Jordan, have done a 360 on myself. So I do believe it's important for leaders, but also important for staff to get 360 feedback, especially if they're working with other people and the leaders don't necessarily have full oversight on the work that they're doing. So what does a 360 look like? It could be a Microsoft form that you send leaders that work with the staff members, asking for strengths, areas for development, just general feedback. It could be as simple as that, or you could use a 360 tool, but we really do believe in 360 feedback. If you ever have questions about 360s, reach out to us. We run those as a part of our services.
Yeah, and there's a great kind of supervisory first-time manager 360 tool offered through SkillScope, through the Center for Creative Leadership. It's 96 questions. I've done it multiple times, and it's of enormous value. And now, having said that, Hen, your 360s being debriefed in the next couple of weeks, and we're very excited about that. But for some people who have never done this, it can be very painful. It can be a painful experience if you've never really been given feedback. So it's something that is particularly important in associations that, again, every person needs to be strong, because you don't have the luxury of, which brings me to my story about focusing on strengths and leveraging strengths. This is Shaquille O'Neal, and I want to talk for like 2 minutes about the Shaq principle. So Shaquille O'Neal, for those of you that know, first of all, he's a wonderful announcer on TNT. And he was one of the 50 best NBA players of all time. Great shooter, great shot blocker, great defensive player. 5 NBA championships, Hen. 5.
Wow.
Which is a lot. Considering we've only seen one in almost 30 years with the Toronto Raptors. But the one thing he was terrible at was free throws. He ranked in the top 10 worst free throw shooters of all time. So he was so bad that the coaches would devise a scheme called Hack-a-Shaq, where they would intentionally foul him because they thought there was a greater likelihood that he would miss a free throw standing still than getting a basket in real time. So what does the Shaq principle tell us? That in associations, we should focus on strengths. We should identify our people, what they do really well, and don't focus on what they don't do well. So if you have someone who's terrible with administration, pair them up with someone who's exceptionally good at administration, because if they're good at bringing in members, if they're good at events, let them thrive in those areas they shine, and let someone else deal with the parts of the job that they're not good at, where possible. It's not always possible, but where possible.
Agreed. So just a few last slides about performance management. To avoid unconscious biases that may exist during employment, what are unconscious biases? The recency effect is the most common one, I would say, that you're basing your feedback on the most recent event. So to avoid that kind of biases, track performance. It could be just a simple log on Microsoft Word, tracking feedback, successes, lessons learned. But I will say, Jordan, it is equally important to give real-time feedback to your staff, meaning something happens, get on a call with them, meet them in person, give them the feedback, whether it's really positive or something not so great happened, to really correct the behavior, correct the situation, rectify it, make sure it doesn't happen again. Because I truly believe that feedback, real-time feedback, is more important than the annual, semi-annual performance reviews where you hoard all this information until then, because it's not as effective when you hoard it till then. Give the real-time feedback and do the performance reviews, looking at a summary of collective feedback, not just the most recent feedback.
Great points, man.
Moving on to let's skip that. Just progressive discipline. We don't like to do progressive discipline. We really like to correct behavior versus, punishing for behaviors, but sometimes you just have to do it. What is something that would entail, progressive discipline? Let's say a health and safety violation. We had one, Jordan, maybe a year or two ago, where an employee drove a forklift into a stock aisle, caused damage to the aisle, caused damage to the stock, but almost caused actual physical damage to staff. We suspended the person based on the situation. So what I'm trying to say, there is progressive discipline steps. You can jump to suspension, you can jump to termination, depending on the severity of the situation. So moving on, Jordan, I'm going to ask you this question. What are some questions you should ask before disciplining an employee up to and including termination?
Well, I think the first question I hope people take from this session is, do you have an employment agreement? Is the employment agreement valid? Can I rely on the employment agreement? Because it's a lot easier to terminate someone if they have a contractual employment agreement that limits, what your liability is as an association. Obviously, you want to ask the reason why. I always say to managers and leaders and clients, before you're going to terminate or discipline someone, have you done everything possible to change their behavior? If you can look in the mirror and say, yes, I have, then you got to move on and you got to do what's right for your business. So have you given them a chance to improve? And then if the answer to that is all yes, 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 then it's like, for the severance package, do you give them a lump sum or salary continuance? Do you offer career transition services to help them get back on their feet after being terminated? This is something that we've launched this year. It's a very quick 6-week, high-intensity career transition program. Do you continue their benefits? Do you allow them to get benefits? Do you require them to sign a release? These are the kinds of questions that you should make sure is done.
Can I just jump in, Jordan, for one second? The one question that is very, very important to ask as well is there anything else that's going on with the employee that we should be aware of, right? So are there medical concerns, mental illness concerns, family concerns, because that could impact the route that we take, prolong the route that we take. So are there other factors to consider is a very important question as well.
Yeah, I mean, mitigating factors, I good catch there, critical, and should be considered in all of these cases as not. It's kind of like when my son was young and he was really badly behaved and he was very wild. And I would say, acting out is not an excuse for bad behavior. Yeah, so you're hyperactive, but still doesn't mean that you can behave like that. So these are mitigating factors, but it doesn't excuse. It might justify it or explain it, but it doesn't excuse the behavior. In terms of just cause, what I want to say here is this is when you terminate someone and you don't pay them anything. What I'll say just very quickly is in Ontario, there's kind of two types of cause. And there's something called common law, just cause under common law, like the decades of cases in Ontario. And in that case, you actually owe your minimum entitlements to notice and severance pay. And then there's the ESA threshold, which is where you don't give anything for cause because of willful misconduct or deliberate behavior that takes place. So it's a little bit different in other jurisdictions outside of Ontario, but as usual, the Ontario courts have kind of screwed this up and made it even more harder for employers. In a cause case, Hen, you got to look at three things. What's the misconduct? What is the circumstances surrounding the misconduct? And that's where you would talk. That's step 2. That's where you talk about mitigating factors. And then step 3, and this is the big question, is the misconduct so significant that the employment relationship cannot be continued? And that's the question that we often have to advise our clients on. The bulk of terminations, Hen, as you know, are without cause, or in the Quebec language. Interesting in Quebec, just like for federally regulated employers, Hen, under the Canada Labor Code, after 2 years, you can't just terminate people without cause. You actually have to have a bit of a reason. But in other jurisdictions, including Ontario, you can terminate without cause, provided it's not for human rights reasons. And if you don't have an employment agreement, then you have to look at the Bardell factors. Why don't you just go through the Bardell factors for everyone? It's Bardell because this is a famous case from 1960. So if you don't have a good employment agreement, then what are you looking at in this case?
Yeah, you're looking at age. You're looking at their current position, what level they're in. You're looking at the market, what's out there right now, and the likelihood of getting another job. You're looking at what else? Jump in, Jordan. What am I missing?
Yeah, you're looking at service. You're looking at compensation.
Exactly.
But the key thing is kind of like, the pin the tail on the donkey where you're blindfolded. Because what I want the participants to leave with today is if you're a 64-year-old, executive director at an association, you're going to get a larger severance package than a marketing coordinator who's 28. That's just the reality, because it's going to be harder for you to find a job. And I'm sure many of you on the line have gone through this process before. I want to just touch very, very quickly on a term called constructive dismissal. This happens where an employer, an association, makes a decision that is unilateral, that is a fundamental change, and that impacts the so-called contract of employment. And I'm saying employment contract in kind of a like a high-level term, not the written contract, but the employment relationship. So, for example, if an association moved from Kitchener to Belleville, or if an association moved from Quebec City to Gatineau, and this would be like a several hour commute, and you're requiring people to come in, that might be a constructive dismissal. So you have to look at, many different factors. But what I would say with constructive dismissal, from the employer's perspective, is keep as many options open for your staff as possible.
Yeah.
Don't eliminate the options, and that will help you protect against constructive dismissal.
I just want to jump in, Jordan, and talk about constructive dismissal as it pertains to right now, with layoffs, with maybe reduction in hours, because it could be considered constructive dismissal if you're reducing hours, potentially laying off. And I just spoke to a client this week where we came up with maybe potentially voluntary reduction in hours. So putting it out there for the team is that, hey, is anyone interested in reducing their hours by 20%? We may participate in the work sharing program, but we were putting it out there for people to volunteer first, which getting the buy-in could reduce that constructive dismissal claim. So just putting it out there that layoffs and reduction in hours could be considered constructive dismissal.
Yeah, no, it's a great point. And, with this slide here, this is one of our last slides. And what I want to say is the implications of a layoff, of a leave of absence, and a retirement, which is illegal in Canada, except under a collective agreement. The implications are all different in these types of transitions, but what's not different, and I'm glad that I can take a minute to kind of mention this and shout out to you, empathy and communication are key. And in all these situations, including terminations. And it's kind of like, it's all about the employee in the case of a layoff, a leave of absence, a termination. It's all about the dignity of the employee. And there's no one better in our organization, ever in our organization's history, than you. And I don't want to say that you take pleasure in terminating people, because you don't.
I do not.
But you have been called in some of the most difficult, high risk, high profile terminations. And it's kind of like, again, as you can see, I like pop culture. It's like in Pulp Fiction, where they call the wolf and they say, we got a problem, we need you to fix it. That's what we do, and that's what our clients do. They call you are our fixer. And these are tough situations that you seem to navigate with great empathy and dignity. So thank you. If I haven't thanked you over the years for doing that.
Thanks, Jordan.
We're just going to wrap up. Kind of a final slide here. Maybe then you can just touch on briefly before we get to any final questions. Any do's and determinations here?
You know what? I I don't like to say that I'm good at terminations, but we do them a lot. So we have a lot of experience with terminations. The biggest do's/don't is focus on the purpose of the meeting when you have the meeting, which is to communicate the message of termination and to walk the person through the package in the most respectful, dignifying way. That's really the goal. So you want to focus on that. All the don'ts are make sure you don't start talking about the whys. Don't make it about yourself. Don't make it a lengthy meeting. There's a lot of don'ts, but really if you focus on the purpose, which is really relay the information and walk them through the package in the most respectful way, then you're achieving the purpose. You're achieving what you need to do.
And
so
being in control. And being
in control, absolutely. It really should not be a long meeting. So bringing back the QR code for everyone to scan. And Joe, I see that you're back to help us with some Q&A.
I am. So what a fantastic session so far, packed with a wealth of great information, especially to help navigate these more challenging times or uncertain times. As everyone knows, we are streaming on multiple platforms. So regardless of what platform you're viewing us on, please feel free to submit your questions. And we do have one coming in from our YouTube platform. So you mentioned the work sharing program. I think a lot of associations are concerned about potentially having to cut back costs to accommodate. Other than the work sharing program, or maybe you can expand on that, what are some creative options to avoid terminations and layoffs of your people during these times?
Yeah, so I would say the work sharing program is available to supplement income. So let's say you are reducing days or hours. The program is there to supplement that. It's not going to pay for all of the hours, but it will pay for a part of it, which helps. So I would say that's definitely a good option. And the program has been revised a little bit to increase the timeline. It is available knowing the economy is going through uncertain times. So they're blasting it out there. So definitely look at that. But, outside of that, a reduction in hours, maybe not significant, maybe just by half a day, by one day. And Jordan, you can jump in to say if you think it's significant, but making not so significant changes like that collectively throughout your organization could help save costs. And it's a temporary thing. It should not be a permanent thing. It should just be until things get better. So Jordan, I don't know if you have anything else to add.
No, I think you covered it. I mean, I think you got to explore all options, and it's about being creative. So
yeah, and the voluntary option is also pretty creative. Maybe not everyone would be interested, but you'd be surprised how many people potentially are interested in having a little bit more work-life balance and having, a day off in the next little while to take care of their personal needs.
Yeah, no, for sure. I have a great question here from Claudia. Claudia, thanks. Great question, Claudia. You asked about the sunrise clause in your collective agreement. And basically, it's funny, Claudia, because I always thought it was called a sunset clause. I've never heard it being called a sunrise clause. But this is a clause in a collective agreement. And by the way, for those on the line, in a unionized environment, you can only terminate for cause. You actually can't terminate without cause. So just a note for the 30% of businesses in Canada that are unionized. But a sunrise sunset clause means that after a certain period of time, the discipline is basically wiped clean from a collective agreement. Mm-hmm. And you're saying years later, there's a significant infraction. I guess, Claudia, what I would say here is you have two options here. One is you could try to negotiate removing the sunset clause, which would be difficult. The other thing you can do as an organization is just take a stand and maybe even lose ultimately at an arbitration, but at least take a stand if you feel strongly that this person is not someone you want to retain. But and another thing you can do is maybe just do high intensity coaching, put a lot of pressure on this person. Don't call it discipline, and maybe they'll eventually self-select from the organization. So great question, Claudia.
Yeah, definitely a great question. And we have another one coming in from another one of our platforms. So knowing that we don't know what the next year or two look like, what can associations do now in their HR practices and policies to really set them up for success and have more flexibility in how they respond to some of the things that might be coming down the pipeline?
Yeah, I would say first, have policies, make sure that you have policies in place. Second, review them and be mindful of upcoming changes. There are, Jordan, you've mentioned in Ontario specifically, upcoming changes to legislation that pertain to employment agreements, but there are some updates also to some compliance policies. So keeping up with that and just really being in the know, subscribe to newsletters, subscribe to our newsletters, to get these updates so that you are aware of what's to come so that you can proactively update your policies.
Yeah, and slightly shameless plug. Another thing you could do is scan the QR code on the screen here and get that HR checklist and do a bit of an audit of your business and connect with somebody on our team to walk through some of the concerns you might have of the economy or the impact it will have on your association too.
Yeah, and I mean, one of the things, Hannah and Joanna, that we did as a business, collectively is like, how are the tariffs going to impact our clients, and what can we do as HR professionals and employment lawyers to minimize those risks? What can we do to help our clients proactively? And we reached out with tools and advice and guidance. We're not experts on tariffs. I don't think anyone is, quite frankly, but there are some things that we can do proactively, and you got to think about it before it's too late, is what I would say.
Yeah, and that's a good point, Jordan. I recall back in 2020 and 2021, our own company, we put together a bit of a task force of people from different departments to continually brainstorm and keep a pulse on what's coming down the pipeline, how might we have to adjust or react and respond in those ways. And so you will have people in your business who are invested in your business thriving and your association thriving through that time. So leverage the skills and the talent and the people you have to get you through those tough times. So those are the bulk of the questions that we have coming through. Thank you, everyone, for your questions. And I'll turn it back over to the facilitators to say thank you. And then I'll close us out with the last housekeeping.
Yes, thank you all for joining. Jordan, as always, it was a pleasure facilitating with you. And until next time.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Amazing. Thank you to Jordan and to Hen and to everyone on the line with us today. We know, it's a bit of an uncertain time, but we're here to support you. And so reach out to us. Our contact information for Rodney Employment Law and Max People is on the screen there. This session is recorded, so you can go back and view it later. And be sure to access that QR code and that complimentary discussion you can have with one of our HR experts. We'd love to be able to support you through whatever you might be facing, economy or otherwise. So have a wonderful day, and thank you again to everyone.
Thank you.